Previously on ALC201.
Hi everyone, welcome to meLecture 5, New Media and the Law, from sexting to trial by social media. Once again, I'm not going to focus on content too much this lecture because we have a fantastic guest lecture which I'll come back to in a moment, and I'm determined to keep this to a one-part YouTube lecture, given that I gave you a three-part marathon last week. So I'm going to make a few announcements at the start, and then we'll get into a little bit of the content via a few conversations and part of the guest lecture. So, first announcement regarding the field trip to the Jewish Holocaust Centre on Sunday the 8th of September. Please ensure, if you can make it, that you register by the end of the week by the doodle poll. That would be fantastic. Just the usual, thanks, Tom. And a few people have asked me whether or not they can bring a friend or family member or a partner. That's more than fine. Please, instead of registering another person, can you please send me an email to my email address, just telling me if you've got a +1. That would be fantastic. Your +1 won't be charged the $10, that would be fine, but I just need to know how many people are going to make it on the day. Also, a quick note regarding the Collaborative Digital Media Project. You'll have hopefully noticed by now on the news items that the due date is 5 p.m. Saturday the 31st of August. Apologies for any confusion there. You'll also see that I've uploaded the Module 2 exercise instructions document, which will look quite familiar. The Module 1 exercise was fairly similar in terms of what you're doing. You're choosing another case study, critiquing and analysing this in a more sustained and detailed way, and most importantly, you're using a different medium, so you're using either a video or an audio recording, and that's actually quite good practice for perhaps some of the skills you're using in the group project, which will be due the final output due shortly afterwards. So bear that in mind. Make sure you get an early start on these assessments. You'll want to be working on both the individual piece and, to some extent, depending on what you're doing at what time, the group assignment as well. So it's really important to stay up to date with the readings, stay up to date with the meLectures, and stay up to date with your assessment. So this week we're looking at the many murky issues regarding the relationship between digital media and the law. And as you'll see, the legal system is really playing a game of catch-up with social media in a number of ways. Your guest lecturer this week is Dr. Deb Waterhouse-Watson, a feminist media studies scholar at Monash University. She published a book earlier this year called Athletes, Sexual Assault and Trials by Media, Narrative Immunity through Routledge, which looks at the media representations of rape allegations within the AFL and NRL Australian football codes. And what Deb has done in her lecture is partly expand on this research, looking at rape myths and how they translate into cases which involve increasingly digital media. Deb also discussed trials by social media generally, looking at the case studies of Jill Maher and the Steubenville gang rape case in Ohio in the United States. And she also talked about sexting and the shifting legalities around that, the really complex issues that are particularly pertinent to young people. To give you a bit of a teaser to this lecture, and I highly recommend that you visit the ecosystem to view or listen to the lecture in full, here's a quick clip from early on in Deb's talk.
So there are two main kind of categories of how these two things interact. When people use new media in ways that constitute crimes or may constitute crimes because law hasn't necessarily worked out how to deal with social media yet. And the way people use new media to either inhibit or enhance the legal process. So lots of people use social media in relation to court cases. So jurors have used it, can use it, complainants can have the accused or supporters of an accused person in a trial, and also other people, bystanders of the case, people who are actually quite unrelated to it, can have issues along these lines. So my research, what led me into this? So as I mentioned, I'm looking at the idea of social trial by media, looking at the news media, so print media, traditional media, looking at language. And so what I found looking at these football and sexual assault cases as they're represented in the Australian media is that there are a number of stereotypes that keep popping up. And so while nobody was saying in print media, this complainant is lying because she's a gold digger or a woman scorned, the way that they were constructing narratives, the way that they were talking about these cases, said it anyway.
The issue of sexting follows on quite neatly from our discussion of sexuality in digital media last week. And one of the questions I asked in the study notes related to which parties or stakeholders are implicated in the issue of sexting, apart from young people, and how might they effectively communicate risk without demonising potential victims, but also thinking about how to portray the potential consequences of one's actions. I know there's many education students doing this unit, and this issue of sexting, while relevant to everyone, is particularly important to them. Earlier in the trimester, when I talked to secondary school teacher Melody O'Mara, I asked her about this issue. Here's what she had to say. The vast majority of teachers who are in the profession today are don't have as extensive a background in using this kind of media. Do you feel that there's a lot of pressure with issues such as cyberbullying and negotiating the legalities of sexting? We're talking about that later in the unit. Those kinds of big issues being so pertinent today. Do you think there's a lot of pressure on teachers to really think through those issues and respond even before things happen? Do you feel that teachers probably feel like they need to educate students even if it's in a unit unrelated to them?
I think there is, and I think to an extent that there should be as well, because all of these things are out there and they are happening, and there's sort of no point being in denial about it. We might as well be taking some initiative and educating people about how they work and the dangers and pitfalls of various things like, Facebook, and sexting is a big one. Like, if you take, 13 to 16-year-olds and give them all this technology, there's going to be some kind of inappropriate usage of it, and that can really backfire on kids as well because they don't sometimes realise what a large audience that they actually have, and they might send something to a friend thinking that it's just between the two of them, but then before they know it, it's up on YouTube and it's all over the school and it's gone viral, and there's a whole range of things there that we, it's probably part of our responsibility to educate them on. It's just that I think the problem at the moment is that kids know more about it than what a lot of people, like teachers, do, for example, so it's always probably be playing catch up for a little while.
Yeah. Some of the issues we're looking at this week are undeniably depressing. So I thought we'd end this meLecture on a slightly happier note by looking back at the past, when nothing was ever taken seriously, when there were no potentially adverse consequences for one's actions, and when people were free to do whatever they wanted to. But who am I kidding? How much has actually changed with the rise of the digital age? This is something you really want to think carefully about. A few weeks ago, I was asked to speak about the topic, the changing world of communication, at the Glen Ira Rotary Club. Towards the end of my talk, one of the members there asked the question, has online media been primarily a positive or a negative development? I answered that humankind is getting better and worse all at the same time. But really, that's probably how it's always been. But let's just for a few seconds pretend that things back then used to be all blissful and peaceful and innocent. Have a good week.
Did you zoom? Can you get that to stay there?